I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. Andrew Kuo does not take days off.
Not a single one, man. How you doing, Ben?
Pretty good, pretty good. A little unseasonable January warmth that is very, very ominous here in New York City.
Yeah.
You're like, this is great outside, and it's really, really terrifying.
It's really terrifying. And also what's terrifying is I've been trying to take advantage of this good weather by walking around my usual streets and neighborhoods. Everything's closed, man. Have you noticed this?
I mean, yeah. You'll go to a place that's you presume would be thriving with commercial businesses like Bedford in Williamsburg or around the Apple Store on 8th Avenue. There is a lot of empty commercial real estate.
Yeah, and full disclosure.
Shockingly so.
Yeah. I don't walk around that much anymore. I used to do it all the time, but now that I never take days off, I'm always working. But yeah, I used to walk around and go in and out of shops, and it's just changed now. Definitely get off my lawn situation here, but a lot of vacant storefronts, man.
Well, I don't think it's get off my lawn because there shouldn't be vacant storefronts. If a city is presumably healthy, you would want those to be occupied by something. It can't be good if people don't want to rent places. If it's because the rents are too high, it's because retail is collapsing. I don't see a good situation in which viable, highly visible locations for commercial real estate are unoccupied.
Yeah, I always think about these huge, gargantuan spaces that are built for like Amazon or Uber to move in. But there's only like a handful of those companies. So I went to that art show in Brooklyn, that street art show that was in an office space that I guess Adidas did. I can't remember. But it was massive. It was like 10,000 square feet. And I asked the person, like, what's going to happen when the show's over? They're like, well, it's an office, like here's bathrooms, here's an intercom. I'm like, if Amazon doesn't move in, then who can move in? If Amazon chooses to go to Hudson Yards, then these guys are left holding the bag like the Knicks.
Well, there was a story in the Times a few days ago about sort of the rise and fall of ultra luxury condos and how many remain unsold. And it was like half, like 4,000 out of 8,000 of these incredibly expensive luxury condos are unoccupied. So it's not even on the base level, like the mom and pop store can't exist anymore because rents are going up. People don't even want the stuff that costs millions. It's just this odd inflation of everything. It doesn't really matter whatever plateau you're on economically.
And people are just waiting. This is because of the EU and Hong Kong, isn't it? It's because whoever these rich people are, and I assume there's a lot of them, they're just waiting to see how those two stories pan out before investing in anything like a luxury penthouse in an empty building. God, everything is about the Knicks to me. Every time we talk about like empty storefronts or like rich people waiting to see what Hong Kong does, I'm like, James Dolan, man. Is he ever going to pay property tax?
None of these guys pay taxes.
I know.
Look, we know from what we've learned about Trump Tower and some of these luxury condos that they are ways to launder money. They're ways to park money outside of, say, your country that may want to take your money away. Mm-hmm. If you're Russian or Saudi Arabian or Chinese, it's a good way to just put your money in America in property, in something that can't be seized from your bank account.
Yeah, I have done zero research, but now you're convincing me that a Morai is a money laundering scheme. Is Randall a way to hide money for Dolan?
Is Bobby Portis not only a garden protector, face puncher, are they laundering $16 million in salary through Bobby Portis?
Yes.
A valid conversation.
Is Todd Gibson not only an enforcer of the Garden Court, but also offshore bank accounts?
Are you a avid follower of like Jane Jacobs' philosophies on, like urban science, city planning, etc.?
Not avid, but I'm a tourist. But
Same.
Go off.
I was going to say she really diagnosed what was happening, and even with Robert Moses as mayor, and the stuff that she foretold really came to pass in a lot of these neighborhoods that were interesting or vibrant. And that once you take eyes off the street and you start building condos and you build further and further away from the ground and you take away families and you add in tourists, you end up with a very sterile, cultureless lack of community. And we saw that. Like, Williamsburg is surreal.
It is surreal.
You can say, oh, actually, it's kind of more interesting now than it was like a hipster campus. Whatever. I'm not even making that argument. I'm just saying, for whatever reason, maybe one would prefer it or something. But it is clearly not a community at all in any sense of the word. It's a bunch of people dumped out of the train, walking up and down, and then leaving. You're totally content to like piss on someone's doorstep because you will never be back. You don't know them. Like,
right.
There's no sense of neighborhood in even like a fraction of what do you expect from a neighborhood that was like thriving.
Did this idea of community and neighborhoods exist in reality, or is it theoretical? Like, if you say in New York City downtown, I think people of a certain age will say the 80s were the golden age where you can get a studio in Soho. I just did a tour of the Judd Foundation, and they kept it as is, and he died in 94. And you kind of got to get the feel of the vibe of what Soho was in 94. But it was rough, right? Like, I remember growing up in New York, my parents thought it was dangerous, so they were just like, we decided not to live in Soho because it was overrun with drugs and crime.
Sure. And in some regards, I think we're all looking for, say, a community that may not have existed when we were there, but it's an idea. At the same time, Williamsburg is an easy example. On a Sunday in the early 2000s, you would walk to McCarran Park and you would know 20 people in there. And I think that's like a side of community that is valid. You would know people walking down the street all the time. And it's not the same thing of like, I don't know, like a Bronx Tale. Like, oh, yes, it's like my family members are here and the old guy from across the street, and like we move each other's cars. I'm not talking about that kind of community, but I'm saying there was sort of a shared vision of what the neighborhood was supposed to be. And you knew people and you recognized people and you could walk into a bar and you could walk into a restaurant and you kind of just knew the lay of the land.
Well, this is crazy, right? Because we're both old enough to remember this. I was the last holdout to get a cell phone, and it took me a few years. I would just go to Orchard Street hoping to bump into my homies because I couldn't really call them at home because they were never home. So, I would go to A-Life, or there was a record store on Orchard Street at the time, and that was kind of the hang, and we sound like old as dust, but like it kind of makes me think of, shout out to Opening Ceremony, that a store near and dear to my heart for sure that announced that they were closing all their retail locations for another strategy, and they opened up in 2002. And I remember when the blackout happened, I did not have a cell phone, so I didn't know what to do because my studio was at the water, like on the west side. And so I just walked to Opening Ceremony and all my friends were there. They were just sitting there in the dark being like, oh, we were hoping everyone who would walk through the door being like, we were hoping you'd show up. And we had like a little hang, we were scared, and it was a scary time in New York after 9/11. And we all like were together and it was cool. I don't know. I just got reminiscent.
Was that a dose of whist? I was like, here it comes.
Yeah, man. I mean, more than anything, I miss my youth. But shout out to Opening Ceremony, whose game plan was to create a space. And I remember they let me throw a bunch of parties in their store. This band called Ratatat came out with a record, and we got to do a show where they played in the showroom, in the front window. It was awesome.
But to that point, you can have a little outlier that creates a micro community in a neighborhood that may not otherwise have that or be particularly open to it, in the way that OC and V-Files were these little havens in a neighborhood that was extremely expensive, that had luxury good places.
Well, this was
you
even
also
before
had V-Files.
that.
I know. I'm saying even recently.
Yes,
like
yes.
V-Files is a better example in terms of like over the last like 10 years when that neighborhood just blew up in terms of its price point, etc. And you still had cool little fashion kids hanging out at V-Files all the time.
Yeah. And Howard Street is even last weekend was still popping. Like I think OC quit while they were ahead and to change and evolve. But when you do something for 20 years, you kind of look around, and sometimes it's not your interests change. But that neighborhood, like Palace, is there now. There's a lot of action going on there. There's a Nike shop right around the corner. There's still so many kids there, but they're mostly Chinese tourists, like
right, you
buying
have
everything.
You have Nike, like 21 Mercer, which used to do a lot of events. I remember going to some when it first opened, with like French Montana would come by and like perform or something. It was definitely a gathering point in that same way.
For sure. And I think it's still happening. I just don't recognize it as clearly anymore because my interests changed. And I think me and you are still interested in IRL stuff and community stuff, but is it an old-fashioned idea, or will it never go out of fashion?
No. Because we've talked about this before. This idea of like introversion, and it's okay to be at home and order Seamless and be on Twitter. Like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I'm not vilifying technology. I'm saying the idea that humans are best equipped to like hide in little furrowed dens and be on their phones, I just don't agree with it. And I don't mean that it's wrong or unethical. I'm just like, when did we decide that talking to people and interacting with other humans was not the way that we wanted to live? That there was this awesome benefit of convenience. That like, how cool is it? I don't have to call a restaurant. Yeah, that's great, dude. You didn't have to talk to someone on the phone? Wow, amazing. And what did you do with your time that was saved by not having to do that and clicking around on Seamless until you found something you liked? Like, what did you gain? Oh, I was able to look at my phone some more. I was able to stream a little more Netflix. Like, we sacrificed a lot of our civic qualities and the way that we interacted with each other for this like little sliver of convenience that I don't even see where we've used that opportunity to do great things. I've saved 45 minutes today because I ordered things on Amazon and Seamless. I didn't have to leave the house, blah, blah, blah. What did you do with that 45 minutes? Like nothing. I didn't plant a tree.
I hear what you're saying, but I pretty much 100% disagree with that take. But I hear you. I understand it, and I get that. But there's been studies, and it's really hard to parse like how people feel, but there's studies that say like online interaction is actual interaction, and it is healthy. And if you talk to a lot of strangers, like on NBA Twitter, for example, it is as healthy as social interaction.
I'm actually not even disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
My point is not that like, you being on text is not the same. Like, I get it. You're fulfilling human needs for connection in different ways.
And it could be a robot, but it's interaction,
Right. But I'm just saying, I just don't think as humans and members of a community that like being indoors in your house online is quite as cool as like going out and talking with people and meeting people. I just don't think as social creatures it's quite as like rewarding. And that's a personal thing.
Yeah. And like, me and you spent some time like in nightlife. I really loved my friends and DJing and getting together and all that stuff. But as I'm older, I have a little sliver of regret that I didn't like stay home more. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like those years went by pretty fast, and I kind of regret like not spending some more quiet time during those years. And that's relative because I did stay home enough. But you know what I mean? Like, as I get older, I kind of reframe it.
I think there is certainly validity to saying I wasted a lot of time in bars with people that I didn't really like, or people that weren't bringing that much to me as a person and in a conversation, etc. At the same time, like, we're buddies from being at the bar and talking about hoops, and
Yep.
I think we knew each other even on Twitter as like people who tweeted about basketball, but didn't even put the two and two together until we like started talking in person.
I remember I was really confused. I think we told this story on Cookies before, but I had been talking to you about like advanced analytics stuff on Twitter pretty regularly, and then at the bar I would see you and be like, "What's up, man?" It's like, "Nothing." And then at some point you had brought up basketball like years into it, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm really annoying. You can't really talk to me about basketball." And you're like, "I'm Detrick." And I'm like, "Oh, motherfucker." Because we had two parallel hang sessions, right?
It's true. It's true. I was thinking about this, recently, and there's that cliche that it's like, you should always be trying to have like, don't eat alone, right? As a cliche, it's like go out and like and meet people for dinner, and don't go back into your little cave of solitude, and don't stay inside necessarily, and trying to do that more and be like, yeah, let's make dinner plans. Let's actually follow through with your friends who you have not had dinner with in like a year because you keep blowing each other off. Yeah. It's like let's that's better than sending a text message every now and then.
Yeah.
And time goes by really fast. I think that was one of my takeaways. You're like, whoa, this is, this person's a buddy. And you're like, oh, it's been a year since we've like hung out. And
I know.
You're like, that's whack.
I mean,
just because we've seen each other on social media and toss some likes around, I'm like, we let's go break bread.
Yeah, I mean, there's that simple, like, I'm a douche, but I'm a jerk, but the economic idea of like when you do something, you're not doing something else, and you're always evaluating what you're missing as you're doing something else. And it could be about money or social time or the way you invest anything into anything. And sometimes as I get older, I feel time's a wasting. And if someone is like, yo, we should get dinner, I'm like, nah. But if you called me, I'd be like, all right, let's do it. I just talked to you an hour ago, but like, let's try that restaurant, And you always have to, as you get older, time goes away. And I wonder if that had a factor in OC's like decision, because they had invested so much time into the community that they're like, there's a smarter way to do that same thing in a different way.
Well, you're intimately familiar with like the inner workings of opening ceremony, and have been around that group for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And you just share what you're comfortable sharing. But what do you think this symbolizes or means, or what is this? And for those who don't really know opening ceremony, I guess maybe I'll let you describe it. But if you are listening to our show and you keep us saying, you hear us saying opening ceremony, you might not know what it is. Like, can you kind of describe what it is to people, and then what this means?
Yeah, simply put, it's like two people, Umberto and Carol, opened up a retail shop, and showed local designers. They started off with like Alexander Wang and Bencho, rest in peace, and Prenza Schuler, and all these awesome labels, and put them into one place called Opening Ceremony. And their idea was it kind of mimics sports and the Olympics, and all these different countries would come in, and they picked a different country every year to feature. Like the first season was Brazil. They'd done Tokyo, London, Korea. All these, they would swap out cities or countries every season, and it became a bit of a hub because Umberto and Carol, in my opinion, are visionaries, and they saw their retail shop as kind of a way to hang out. They loved music, they loved food, so they would have these really fun casual dinners and these big blowout parties that me and you were at. And they had a sense of whimsy to them that I thought was really great in opposition to something like Barney's, rest in peace as well, which was, it felt like the establishment that wouldn't let like two people like Umberto and Carol in 100%. And they went on to design for Kenzo, and their success is well documented. But
yeah, they would do, you know, really good parties. They would do sort of inventive outdoor events. Their Fashion Week presentations and runway shows became really interesting and exciting and theatrical as time went on. They would put on like a play, or
exactly.
They would have a show outside with all these cars like under an overpass or whatever. They were always really pushing the envelope in terms of creativity on different avenues.
Yeah, and you can approach them, you know, if you were in their world and be like, well, can I sell this odd thing at your store? It's not, you can't wear it, it's not art, but it's a thing, and they would support you. And their orbit was kind of awesome. Spike Jonze worked with them a lot, Chloe Sevigny. And they championed a lot of good music. I think Ghetto Gothic was really close to their hip. They employed really interesting people that ended up making awesome things now. I mean, it was awesome.
So so I guess is it over? I mean, what does this symbolize in terms of them selling the company? Like, does it mean that OC will not have a store? Does it mean that they will not have parties and like events? I mean, what does this mean? Is OC just done?
So what has been revealed is they're going to close down all their retail shops. And, like, I think Umberto and Carol are brilliant. So, like, I think we will see a different version of this. They promise to focus on their own brand. So their brand will take a form of something bigger than it was before, but not in retail. And I expect more parties. I expect more music and food. And let's see what happens. But a job well done, man. Like, awesome. They did it.
Shout out opening ceremony.
Yeah, man.
In other news about schisms, fractions, relationships, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, it appears that their alliance, their peaceful treaty, has been shattered in the days before the recent Democratic debate. It was leaked by obviously someone close to Elizabeth Warren. One would assume that Bernie Sanders implied that said that a woman cannot be president in a meeting they had 3 years ago. This had not been mentioned at any other point, and now it came out right before debate. At the debate, there was a little drama afterwards when they were both mic'd up.
You called me a liar on TV. Is that what she said, right?
That's what she said, and he was like, well, you did that to me as well. And then she kind of seemed like she was willing to start talking about it, and he was like, why don't we talk about this later? And then they kind of like went their separate ways. And I think she snubbed his extension of a handshake as well.
She did.
What's your reading of this newfound beef between the two progressive candidates, or the two most progressive candidates out of the Democratic assemblage?
The socialist conundrum. I think the take that I just have is they're both right. It was a moment of miscommunication, because Sanders, clearly, he just said, like, how could I believe that if Hillary Clinton won the popular election? Obviously, I don't believe that. And that was 4 years ago. And he's on record saying the opposite of what Warren accuses him of. But if they're both right in that, I think they misinterpreted that conversation. I'm sure Sanders was closer to saying, in order to beat Donald Trump this time, the stars have to align, and we have to put up something to sway the 40% of voters that could go either way. And she read that as, you don't think I can do it. But that means they're both wrong as well. So they're both lying as well. It's just annoying. I don't know why we're talking about this and not policy. And I know policy is not as fun as drama, but this is just a distraction, because Bernie Sanders is not a jerk. This is a waste of time.
This is clearly, from a political standpoint, something that Warren wanted to introduce because her campaign has been flailing a little bit, and she's running for fucking president.
It's tough out there, man.
You know, like, this is a contest to be the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
If you are faced with the option of not being president and canceling your campaign and throwing some elbows around to try to take some votes away from the guy who is your closest competitor, even if it means fucking up your guys' truce, your somewhat friendship, who even knows how close they really are.
True.
She's running for president, man.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm with you. I think Bernie said something along the lines of, it's going to be tough for a woman because Trump is a big sexist. And we saw how the voters, we know that it's tough for women candidates because of these metrics or these markers or whatever. Yeah. I don't think at all he said, don't run for president, a woman can't run. I don't think he said that at all. I think he acknowledged probably some of the biases of the electorate.
Styles make fights.
But at the same time, someone had a good discussion of this. I can't remember where it was posted. But they said, but at the same time, Bernie saying that there might be more difficulty for a woman to get elected is like an implicit bias that it's harder for women. And, it's this big circle that kind of goes around and around and around.
Yeah.
I will say, I do think that Warren has chosen to interpret this in a way that benefits her politically. And her going out there and saying, I think you called me a liar on national television. She knows she's mic'd up. Like, she was hamming it up for the cameras because she's running for president.
Yeah, and her her long view is a lot about her own identity, with the whole...
being a Republican and stuff?
No, but her ethnic background and her position as who she is representing as a human on Earth. And I find a lot of validity to that, and I don't hammer her for that. But as you said, you're running for the leader of the free world. So this is not going to be fair. It's going to be gross. And I know I'm annoyingly polite about this stuff, but like, I wish they were talking about policy. This is kind of interesting, but not that interesting.
It is a non-issue.
Yeah.
And it's a totally fraudulent issue because no one actually thinks that Bernie believes a woman can't be president.
Does Ben Simmons want it enough?
It's a non-issue. It's a he said, she said, between two people who have not discussed this conversation for 3 years, that somehow magically emerges as a talking point a week before or whatever, a couple weeks before the Iowa primary that will, if Bernie wins it, Warren's got a long, long road to go. Like, she needed something here. And it clearly came from her camp. It didn't come from Bernie's camp.
Yeah. But it's interesting how, as we're seeing all these politics play out and how they're changing so much, I think this would have been, not for nothing, like Trump assassinating a very important man on the global scale and not having it start a huge conflict. It was shocking to me, and it still could happen. I mean, we talked about this last time. It is still terrifying to me what transpired in Iran, but we used to get really upset over politicians not inhaling marijuana, and that used to be seismic, or someone not comparing themselves to JFK. Now all these things are going down, and it's just like, I think we care about certain things very much, and things attach themselves to our memory, but this doesn't matter. And when we see it happening, I'm like, we don't care about this anymore. Let's stop pretending.
There is one thing to be a little bit cynical about Warren in this situation, was that she rose to prominence in this race early on because of her policy. She had really good plans, and she spoke about them, and people were excited, and she hit all the right notes from a policy standpoint. And a lot of those sort of fell apart. She to a degree, walked back Medicaid for all and lost sort of her status as a standard bearer for changing the healthcare system in America. She came out with a very boilerplate response to the assassination, where Bernie did not. Yeah. And like, exactly to your point, instead of saying, hey, let's get this about policy, where she was falling off, she went the other direction. She went civility. He said this, he was rude. he believes this. She veered dramatically away from policy towards bullshit.
Or maybe strike that word, because this might be even smarter for her.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's very hard to tell, but she may be looking at her numbers and saying my policy isn't reaching people, and she's really smart. I trust both these people with the presidency. It's better
Warren
than
is-
what we
yes.
got.
Warren is extremely smart.
Yeah.
She has shown good policies. I am not one of the people saying Warren's a snake.
No.
I'm like, yo, she's running for president, man. Like she has to do some things to try to get there.
I prefer her over what we have. Absolutely.
Of course. But I will say, though, that I don't know that this will turn out to be a good move, because while she is very smart and has good policies and is good during debates and has all these elements of being a very sharp, cagey, good politician, her instincts do fail her on occasion.
God, getting the presidency is very hard, man. It's so hard. Yeah, you're right.
The DNA test was a huge blunder that still kind of haunts her, and it made no sense. It was a huge unforced error. And the same way putting out that bullshit statement about the assassination. That was not good. And I think this information coming out and the way she handled it, we'll see. It could also have the effect of people who liked Bernie really turning on her.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see. I love it. It's chess.
It's also the Hillary Clinton playbook. It's the neoliberal Bernie bro playbook all over again. This is the third time they've tried to come after Bernie with the idea of he's like the rude male and all of his followers are rude males. This is the third time. First was the whole Bernie bro thing. Then
They
early
don't
on,
exist. Bernie bros don't exist.
Then he got smeared all over the place, because one of the guys in his campaign way down the food chain was inappropriate and got Me Too'd, and they tried to make that stick to him in the same way. And now this is the third time they've come back and tried to use male identity against him. And again, Bernie may have some implicit biases that he believes it would be harder for a woman to beat Trump or become president because of the landscape of America. But man, we know the guy's policies. We know where he stands on things. The idea that Bernie Sanders is a sexist just falls flat.
Does fall flat. Do we know if he's going to be standing 3 years into a presidency?
I don't know, man. I'm fine with him winning and dying as long as the vice president is good.
What if it's my boy Andrew Yang?
Sure. All right, so moving along to some basketball-related topics. Now that we're half an hour and change into this show.
Oops.
There's been a little NBA trade news.
Oh.
It's an uninteresting trade. It is one that does not involve big names. It's kind of like in a fantasy league where you just do something to get some action going, get the blood flowing. So the Timberwolves sent Jeff Teague back to Atlanta, where he originally started his career. And they got, along with Travian Graham, who's sort of a bad player. And in exchange, who did they get? What's his name? Your boy, shooter. Why am I spacing on his name?
Kyle Korver.
It's Keith Van Horn?
Is it Jeremy Lamb?
Anyway, so Alan Crabb came back. And these are all guys with expiring contracts who are all fairly bad. Why are they doing this? What's going on here, Kuo?
I don't know. So I was reading Twitter.com, and Ian Bagley, who seems to be cornering the market on Knicks beats, but he said the Timberwolves have interest in Dennis Smith Jr. and could be clearing a roster spot and money to make a deal with New York to somehow acquire Dennis Smith Jr. and parts. Why?
I mean, because, all right, so Teague and Crabb and Graham, again, all these guys' contracts are expiring. And neither of these teams are overly competitive. So I don't think there's an immediate impact for any of them via this trade. It does make sense if you, as you said, in order to maybe open up a roster space. And if Atlanta's like, we just kind of want to have a backup point guard down here behind Trae Young, and we'll play Teague.
Yeah. I mean, an interesting overarching thing before we get into the details is making a small trade like this of inconsequential contracts and players kind of sends a message to each other, the Knicks Atlanta and Minnesota, but also to the rest of the league, being like, we have goodwill and we're open to a trade. Sort of like when you lend somebody money, you're not necessarily asking for money back, but you're sending the signal being like, oh, I care about you and I'm fair and I'm willing to do this in goodwill because my investment isn't monetary. It is an act of faith. And I think a trade like this is interesting because when it goes down, the Knicks' ears perk up. I think a lot of ears perk up because Cat has been rumored to be unhappy. There's a sucker out there for Andrew Wiggins. They have pieces there that are traps, but also Cat is looming. And
Yes. So Minnesota is currently 15-25. They could chase that 8th seed that's 8-22, but there are several teams in between also scrambling for the same spot. If you were to make a guess, you would say Minnesota is not going to make the playoffs this year.
And they have their own pick.
And Atlanta has the worst record in basketball. They have 9 wins, tied with the Warriors, behind even the relegated Knicks. Them getting incrementally better because Jeff Teague will give them more solid point guard backup minutes than whoever they had, it just doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Okay, you're going to win a couple more games. Ultimately, they're a terrible team.
Yeah, and I don't even think Trae Young needs mentoring. I think he needs ballers.
Maybe they liked Teague because he was part of the organization in the past. I couldn't say.
He might be a great guy. Yeah, for sure.
But all things being said, these teams have their fate sealed for this season. Mm-hmm. And none of these players are on contracts that extend past the season. Mm-hmm. So it's just moving some stuff around, as you said, almost for the sake of moving things around.
It sends a signal to the league before the trade deadline in a few weeks, I think. And the Timberwolves are smart now. What are they doing?
That's what I'm curious about. They're certainly playing Shabazz Napier as if they're trying to trade him.
Who's on an expiring?
He's expiring and he's playing like 30 minutes a game. That's a dude you were trying to get rid of at the deadline.
I mean, I want every contending team to try to add him for nothing. The Sixers, for sure. The Lakers could use him.
The Sixers should go and trade for him.
For sure. And he is making 1.8 and I believe is an unrestricted free agent next year. So is my guy Jordan Bell.
Target. Yeah. Jordan Bell, is he finally getting minutes?
No. But he's making 1.6. He fell off a cliff, man. His rookie season was so promising. I'll take that L. I really liked his game.
Max Jordan Bell.
Does he care about his pregame fits more than his actual game? We'll never know.
Does he want it enough?
But so Wiggins is the dummy prize and Cat is the prize. I don't think the Minnesota Timberwolves are in a situation where they have a new GM who's smart, who looks at Cat and says, we'll take the sum of his parts. I think he looks at Wiggins and says, I think there's a sucker out here for Wiggins.
I'm surprised that maybe there was an effort to trade him earlier this season. I am surprised that it didn't happen. But maybe Wiggins, it's still not a rehabilitated product yet. They went out, he played better. He was more efficient. They used him in a more spread floor, and he was able to kick the ball out of drives. His assists went up. Played pretty well.
But he regressed to his mean, right?
Well, there was a narrative that he had kind of changed as a player. He had turned a corner. And I don't think that was really true. But maybe no one believed it.
I mean, all it takes for the Knicks to unload Porzingis for you is like a good game versus them. So the next time the Timberwolves come in, and Wiggins maybe has like 7 assists, the Knicks are like, oh, we found a diamond in the rough. Number 1 overall pick. We'll take a chance on him. We have the money.
So Wiggins' scoring is up to 22.8 a game. He's playing a lot of minutes. He's chucking up shots. But there aren't a lot of other good things. But on paper, you can say
he is a prom king.
This guy's averaging. He's a prom king.
Yeah.
He's averaging 23 points a game. He's in the limo. He's got a tux on. He's got a corsage. It's a prom king.
Yeah. Is he the type of prom king to take a nerd to the prom, or the prom queen, like the cheerleader? Is he a 90s prom king who takes the librarian's assistant?
Yeah, he's weird because he's a little bit emo, and he's seemingly an introvert who like wears his headphones all the time and like doesn't talk to people and is viewed as someone who doesn't want it enough. But he's a chucker who likes long twos and prom kinging it up.
He may want it more than anybody.
Is he a sensitive prom king?
Yes. So,
he takes the nerdy girl and is like really nice to her. He's a gentleman prom king.
Right. Yeah. Or we see all those feel good stories on social media of, it's so funny, right? Like every time someone calls a couple cute, it's code for like one of these is not like the other, like someone is definitely dating above and below their punching weight. It's like, you guys are so cute. I'm like, how dare you?
I remember writing a story about Andrew Wiggins versus advanced stats for The Ringer 3 years ago.
God, time
and
flies.
there were some quotes from his teammates, on the Timberwolves that were basically like, he doesn't want it. And they said it in like a nice way, but like
Was it Jimmy Butler? Jimmy Butler says that about everybody because he wants it.
Who was it? It was Jordan Hill. And this is what he said to me in the locker
Knicks
room.
legend Jordan Hill.
Yeah, and this was at the Garden.
The Mecca.
He said, he's so quiet. He doesn't talk much. He's so cool, so laid back. I feel like if he got that Kobe mentality, or the Russell Westbrook mentality, to go out every night and just be fierceful, what a great word.
Fantastic.
Fierceful. Ain't nobody going to stop him. He's just that good of a player. There's nothing wrong with being quiet or laid back. He could be shy, just may want to be by himself. He still goes out there and plays ball. But he still hasn't gotten to that bright spot. He's going to get there and shock the world. That's kind of a wild quote to say about your teammate.
That's Jordan-esque, man.
Says Jordan Hill.
Yeah. Hey, man. You are what you are.
The Minnesota Timberwolves. The Jordan Hill and the Jordanaires.
Like, do you think we've seen enough of Wiggins where even someone like James Dolan would say, there's no higher of a ceiling, we can push this? He wants it as much as he'll ever want it. Or does James Dolan say, I think I can get more out of him. I think we can add this Mamba mentality.
I don't know if Wiggins is someone that can be exchanged for a non-bad contract, because we do know that he's not a star and then he makes a lot of money.
He makes 27 this year, 29, 31, and 33. That's a lot.
That's a lot, and it's for a long time.
Yep.
I think there is a, if someone's like, would you trade him for Al Horford? There are certain people who would be like,
no.
I'm not saying I would do it. Certain people might be like, you know what? They're both bad contracts. They're both 4 years. Yeah. One's younger. I'll take Wiggins. He can score.
Right.
There may be people who would believe that, despite the fact that Al is like vastly better player. He is like in his 30s.
Yeah.
So I just mean, for sake of argument, you could move him for another onerous contract. I don't think you can just dump him, though.
I mean, the Knicks have space for Wiggins and Towns. So, like, what if the Minnesota Timberwolves were like, we'll give you Wiggins, we'll give you Towns if you take Wiggins, but we want every single thing back, and but you guys also start from scratch.
What am I talking about? He's destined for the Knicks. I'm here making an argument that he's not going to be on the Knicks. We know he's going to be on the Knicks.
We know he's going to be on the Knicks.
I'm checking my phone for updates about him being traded to the Knicks right now. Oh, it still hasn't happened.
Is Karl Anthony Towns' max contract a sweetener for Wiggins?
I mean, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a Knicks, I'd kind of do that because Cat doesn't come around ever.
But you're like, oh, we'll take the core of this 15-win Minnesota team and add a Morai.
Hey, man, you do what you can do. Well, see, it's interesting because I think Dolan, who's probably not a basketball head, even though he's at games, and Mills, who maybe has the right spirit, they may be doing the right thing in that they're saying, if there's an undervalued former number one pick, yeah, even though he makes a ton of money, if we can get a former number one pick who's undervalued, we have to take a look. And I think their instincts are correct. I think the fault with the Knicks, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, is their scouting. The scouting is what's letting them down because they're presenting Dolan with these players like Amori, like a Portis. And Dolan is thinking that we're getting some value because these guys are actually, with some usage, borderline all-stars like Amori. I think their scouting is leading them astray.
That could be true.
It's the wrong guys.
They also seem to have an orthodoxy that is based in a mythology of the past about the Knicks being this tough, bruising team that beats your ass. And they went out and got garden protectors. That was the marching order for this offseason, was getting guys to prevent the team from being disrespected at home.
But so did Elton Brand, and he got some of the right guys. Like, the Knicks just get the wrong guys.
That's true. But I'm also saying, if you're like, I want Portis, why do you want him? He's tough. So it's true that they're getting the wrong guys, but I'm saying the flaw might be the attributes they're looking for versus like scouting. They might just want the wrong thing versus like getting the wrong guy.
Well, this is my argument because we've always assumed that the intent was wrong. What if the intent is right and the execution is wrong? What if James Dolan and Steve Mills saying, we want tough players who take pride in their game, however you phrase it. And what if their scouting is like, we've identified 5 players that fit what you want. It's Portis, Amori, and Taj Gibson. It's the personnel is wrong, but maybe the intent is fine.
That could be true as well. We don't know if it's the actual execution or the idea because it's never really spelled out.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know with many franchises, but I'm willing to go there because I think I can relate to Dolan in some ways, but I cannot relate to their scouting team, who identifies the wrong guy every time, but with the right idea. Like, undervalued, high draft pick. I'm like, that's the right idea. You picked the wrong one in Andrea Bargnani. It's like you leave him alone. You know what I mean?
So what do you make of the Knicks' claim that they are not going to trade Morris, but instead build around him? Do you believe them?
Chess, baby. They're trying to pump up Amori's value. That's all I could believe in because this would be the funniest thing if they tried to pump up a bad stock so it looks good, and through their own doings are like, this looks kind of good. Maybe we should keep it.
like we're a dramatic overpay for the guy that we signed and tried to trade off.
Yeah. That's like putting lipstick on a pig and being like, oh, wait, this pig is very attractive. My bad. Even though I'm holding the lipstick.
This silk purse that I've made out of a sow's ear is incredibly fetching.
Yeah, I think
I'll have it for a couple of years.
I'm trying to sell you these bootleg Kanyes, but I might want to keep them. They look kind of good.
Can I buy them back from you for double?
Yeah. Okay, they're as good as good Kanyes. I decided to keep them. Right, it's like a company lying to pump up their stocks and being like, ooh, we're valuable now, though. Do we want to do this? It's like, we cooked our books, but the stock's looking good. Oh, man.
I still think if someone offered them a first rounder and an expiring...
Oh, my God, you got to take that.
They would take it.
I would take a second rounder.
I mean, you have to take anything.
Yeah, he's walking. You take anything for him.
The Knicks are like, all right, handshake deal for your max. But it's kind of what you were saying about tricking yourself is true, though, because Morris is shooting 47% from 3.
Yo, he's been okay.
He's been good. I mean, he shot 47% from 3 on like 5.5 attempts a game. He has been incredibly accurate from long distance, and he's a good defender. Solid defender,
Not a prom king.
Not a prom king. But he is also a career 37% shooter. He's shooting 10% higher for 33 games than at like any other point in his career. So not only are they saying, we're going to keep this guy, they're saying this potentially after he's amassed stats that are out of sync with everything he's ever done, except that he's done it for the Knicks. So that's now to the Knicks who he is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same way as like if you bust a Knicks ass in a game, they want to acquire you. They're like, how could we get rid of this guy? He's doing all these good things as a Knick.
Dennis Smith Jr. dropped a triple-double, and the Knicks traded for him like 48 hours later for Porzingis at the Garden.
So, I mean, how can you expect them to not try to keep this guy long term? He's shooting 45% as a Knick from three. You got to keep that guy.
This is my point. The deficiency is the scouting. I think the scouting brings these numbers to Dolan and be like, yo, we may have found a diamond in the rough. We know he's not super young, but we've turned him into actually a borderline all-star. Don't we want borderline all-stars? And Dolan's like, yeah, we do. I would love all-stars on my team.
I love all-stars.
Yeah, that intent is right, but the person is wrong, right?
This is true. So there's a similar situation with Dennis Smith Jr. or a Wiggins. So Markelle Fultz, a former number one pick, who played only, 500, 700 minutes over 2 seasons in Philly, where he was in and out of the lineup with injuries or whether it was anxiety related. It was never solved. No one ever really figured out what happened. No one ever came to any resolution or explanation. He just came back this year, and he's been playing for Orlando. And he's been pretty decent.
Okay.
But, he's been pretty decent.
Big game last night, triple-double in a win versus the Lakers.
Yes, so that's why I'm bringing it up. He had a big game, and this, of course, made everyone lose their shit. How could the Sixers have traded this guy? He had a triple-double with a spin move, and then he did a reverse, and then he cooked LeBron James off the dribble, and, this has sort of been a periodic thing this season where he'll have a good game, and there's just this outcry of furor from a lot of Sixers fans about, the fact that they traded him for more or less garbage.
Cap space to get Horford, right?
That's
or
what
sign
it turned out
Tobias.
to be, yeah.
Whatever.
It was the Horford one because Tobias, they had, the free
rights
agent rights.
Right.
I want the best for Fultz, and he's showed some promise. But, when you look at him play, and he's had some big moments, do you think he's a potential star? Has he emerged in this way that, wow, the Sixers are going to regret this for a decade?
Not yet. He's not good yet. He's better than he was in the 2 years he was in Philly. But he has some big games. His usage is bumped up. He hasn't been that great yet, but I'm going to zig and not zag. I think the Sixers blew that whole thing. I think they should have. This is my whole beef with winning culture. Every team thinks they have a winning culture. But when you unload guys who need help, then it's just on the person. It's on the player. So if you're just swapping out good players for bad players, it's not cultural. I think the Sixers should have waited on him. Space is space. You can create space in a lot of ways. But a number one pick who's not cheap, he was making $10 million a year, I believe. You still wait on him. He has more value than just space. If you just do the Knicks thing, or versus the Knicks thing, if you just play him a lot, you can move him for a lot more than just money.
I'm sympathetic to the Sixers in terms of trading him because when they benched him, he just quit. He was like, I'm out. I'm shutting down. After he was taken out of the rotation for a couple games, last season. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a lot of. I get where the Sixers were coming from and being like, we want to win a championship. We want to use our cap space to sign people. We want more flexibility. We need to just open this up. It's $10 million, and it's for a guy that we don't know if he'll even play for us. I'm sympathetic to that. At the same time, it's not even about the sunk cost of Fultz. That's not even part of it. At the same time, Philly does not have a lot of access to young talent. And $10 million is not a ton to pay. It's not cheap. But for a guy who you believed was the best player in a draft, a guy who does have some skill sets and plays a position that you don't have anyone, to say we'll just move on from him, there is a potential for a really bad outcome.
Mm-hmm. And this is a testament to Embiid and Simmons, who are so good that we kind of gloss over that the Sixers swung and missed huge on Fultz and Okafor. That's a number one overall pick that you traded up to get, and a number 3 pick. That Porzingis was right there. I think they should have just taken Porzingis.
And Tobias is a solid player. He's very useful in their ecosystem as a guy who
they need him.
It's like a straight line scorer, but he's not. He's not a great player at all.
No,
he's not. He's a good scorer. He's not an exceptional scorer. He's league average scorer who can kind of do it from a bunch of different places. He can get to the basket a bit. He can shoot threes a bit, mid range. He's a good offensive player. His defense is all right.
He's not a problem.
Not a problem. But, they traded to, some draft picks, some young guys, and they used up a lot of their cap space for Tobias Harris. I don't think you can say, when you look at their other options, guys who are around like Brogdon or D'Angelo Russell or Jimmy Butler, that you're like, this was the best way to spend this money. And was the Fultz thing, was that a win to get to deal him off and then get Al Horford? I don't know. It's
hard to tell. I mean, I've been a proponent of Fultz, even with his shooting problems and his depression, I'm assuming. As just an on-ball defender, he has value. He's a player that had a use to him. And even at $10 million, I thought they should have just waited on him.
For me, it's mostly about trading someone at a very low point, where his value had crumbled to nothing, and that's when they decided to deal him off. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think he fits with Simmons at all. Fultz can't shoot for shit. Mm-hmm. He's shooting 25% from 3, and it looks bad a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. He can't shoot. He still is not an efficient scorer. He is a guy though who can take care of the ball. He's a good passer. He plays solid defense. He is certainly a guy that Philly could put on the floor when Simmons is off. But if Philly is talking about winning a championship and committing the resources to that, I don't think that Fultz could be on the court with Simmons in meaningful minutes. I just don't see it, because two guys who can't shoot, who both handle the ball, I think is an issue.
Maybe. And Fultz is not a basketball genius like Lonzo Ball. But
Lonzo can shoot.
Yeah, he's turned it around.
Fultz can't shoot shoot at all. He can't shoot at all.
Well, Fultz is interesting, right? Because we're kind of seeing an unlocking of him a little bit. And he shot fine in Washington. It wasn't extraordinary, but he was a shooter. I still want to see this play out. He's working it out in real time.
It's true. And where his actual improvements have been offensively are that his shooting percentages on shorter jumpers have gone up quite a bit. So maybe he is just sort of working his way out. Mm-hmm. That by next year he will actually be a competent shooter from deep. And if he can do that, then he will be a really interesting player. But when Philly played them last, he was fully ignored. He had a pretty good game, but in general, people just walk away from him. And
he didn't keep the defenses honest?
They were dishonest. And it's different when it's a guard that's like that.
Yeah.
And it's different when it's a guy who's 6'10", who scores in the post and runs out in transition. Anyway, I am happy for Fultz. I also don't know that he would be a huge difference maker on this Philadelphia team.
I think they blundered it. Just talking about in the heartless way of talking about assets and what it takes to get assets and their value. As soon as the Sixers unloaded Fultz for cap space, I think 28 other teams were slapping their head, being like, we would have taken him for cap space too. The Knicks are not in the league, so they don't count. But I think that price was shockingly low. And for him to kind of have a nice triple-double, an inefficient triple-double, you'll take that for cap space and $10 million.
Absolutely.
Right?
Look, Philly, post-Hinkie, set their assets on fire.
Yeah, dude, it was a fire sale.
They had this huge stack of assets, and they got rid of them for nothing. They got nothing for Nerlens. They got nothing for Jeremy. They went and got Jimmy Butler, then let him walk. They traded up to get Fultz, and then traded him away for nothing. They missed on essentially all of their late picks until getting Shamet, who they traded away, and then our guy Thibault. So they missed on a lot of picks. They traded away assets. They traded away young players who were on good deals. And all that said, they're in good position because they happen to have the two best players in the Eastern Conference in terms of on the same team.
Yo, shout out to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And that's why we forget all their huge misses and blunders, like you said, because they're young and they're that good. I mean, I think I was watching the ESPN broadcast of last night's game versus the Nets, and Doris Burke is like truth slayer, like a truth teller. Like, she was just like, why are we dogging this kid? Ben Simmons is a dominant young player. So what if he can't shoot? And then they went to ESPN SportsCenter after the game, and the whole broadcast was trying to turn the tide against Simmons, and they kind of ended up on the side of like, well, he's amazing because he had a great game, but Shaq couldn't handle the ball. Like, what are we asking of this kid? So we're seeing a shift a little bit because he's had such a great month, right?
Well, he's so undeniably fucking good.
Yeah, it's undeniable.
And that's why it's been strange to me when former athletes and basketball players who understand the game and played it were critical of him, because like Barkley couldn't really shoot, Shaq couldn't shoot. You're like, why would this be a stance that you would take instead of saying, well, as a dominant player who also didn't shoot, who had trouble with free throws as well, why should he have to do these things if he does other things well? It's an odd dynamic where if you play a lot of ball, there are guys you play with who are not good shooters who you know are good and who have a big impact on the court. And you see it happen all the time.
Yeah.
And like, you know what I mean? Like, you look at him play for like 5 minutes and it's obvious that he's an incredibly good basketball player.
Yeah, and this is sort of like politics, and in the way that these ex-players are unreliable narrators. I'm a jerk for saying that phrase, but I think I don't really take them seriously because they're singing like a tune, and this tune is a familiar tune that we know. As soon as we see it, we can sing it. It's like, oh, Kyrie's great. I would never hire him in my company because he would upset people. He's a cancer, but he's good at what he does. But I know something. It's a humble brag or just a brag. And it's great for jokes, and the interns really gobble that stuff up. But I personally just like don't pay attention to any of these guys.
Same. I also think that people are just lazy, because there are opportunities to find contrary takes that are interesting and funny, and you can really stand out if you look at these matters of conventional wisdom in a different way, or with a little more insight, instead of us all just collectively saying, well, obviously Simmons has to shoot. Well, obviously, these two players, despite the fact that their team always wins 50 games and has revolving cast around them and has been mismanaged by the front office and is a lopsided roster, the numbers are all good when they're together, and the team might win a championship. They should be split apart. We should make a deal. Yeah. And they shouldn't trade him for Cat. They should trade him for a player that is not as good, but a better fit. Why would people jump on these bandwagon topics and just sound like everybody else? Like, shouldn't you go out there and be like, you know what? I'm looking at this a little different. And we don't see it that much. So shout out to Doris for doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who I love very much, who does this thing when we go find a place to eat. I'm like, oh, I want to go to this place that I love. And she was just like, I hate it. I don't like it. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, then let's go to a place that I haven't been. She's like, I love it. And then as soon as I'm like, oh, actually, I've been there, she's like, oh, I hate it now. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction of like, maybe your intent is to start a conversation, but it reads as, I don't believe in contrarianism, but I believe in people who kind of always dispose themselves in the direction of the opposite of what they see.
At least being contrary is interesting.
Yeah, I can be
convinced. The problem
convinced.
with what we're seeing on the discussions of Kyrie and Simmons, that's essentially coming from the Beantown media mafia, is
the BMO
are unified. They're unified, coherent stances and agendas that say the same thing over and over. The Sixers need to get rid of Simmons because he won't shoot and he's defying his coach. Kyrie Irving is a bad teammate and is a cancer to the locker room, and the Celtics are better without him. But these two things get said over and over and over and over and over until they're just sort of conventional wisdom and everyone seems to believe them instead of looking at them a little differently.
Yeah, Jason Tatum and Gordon Hayward just need time. They're going to be superstars. Ben Simmons, you got to trade him. You have to trade him.
You have to trade him for Jonathan Isaac and Evan Fournier. You just have to trade him for two people that we're not scared about that will make sure that the Sixers don't beat Boston for the fourth time this year.
I listened to someone propose Joel Embiid for Landry Shamet and Montrezl Harrell. It's wild, but
whatever. All fans are nuts. Like
I love it.
The Sixers may seem particularly apocalyptic as a fan base, but it's probably just because that's who I'm hearing run their mouth. If you were reading a lot of posts and comments from fans of like the Magic, it's probably the same way.
Yeah, and the Knicks before they crushed everyone's soul. The fan base was as bad as that, but now everyone's just not goth enough, in my opinion. Not new metal enough. The tips are not bleached enough.
I mean, I don't even know if Knicks fans are even doing it for the nookie anymore.
Do they want the cookie?
Who's a happy fan base right now though? Memphis. Shout out to the Grizzlies, who have had an incredibly good offense over the last 15 games, which has launched them into the 8th seed in the Western Conference playoff hunt. They are led by a rookie phenom, Ja Morant, who has been really fantastic and has captured the imagination of the NBA fans.
Some people even saying that he's a bigger star and a better player than the Nacho King, Luka Doncic. That's wild.
I don't believe it, but I like it. I like
That's
this
a good
idea.
take.
I like it. Look, their offense has really caught fire. Second best over the last 15 games. And part of that is because Triple J has started playing offensively up to his potential. And he's a really special player too.
I like him more than Ja Morant. Ja Morant is so awesome. I'm excited about his dunks. I'm excited about his handle, his offensive swagger. But even though he's better than the scouting report, you still take him after Zion. And if you look at his advanced stats on B-Ball Reference, he's okay. He's got a negative BPM. He's a good offensive player at 1.2. Obviously, he's been inconsistent because he's a rookie. But he's that bad defender.
He mostly just can't defend yet.
Yeah, it's at a negative 1.9. And we knew this about his size, that he would be taken advantage of, kind of like Trae Young. So, you'll take him. He's a star. But it's funny how we don't talk about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the same light because of just dunks.
Yeah, but dunks are ethical and they're awesome.
They're so awesome. So awesome. And I'm a Ja fan, but I think Triple J is better. But since the basketball universe revolves around the mecca of basketball, I'm sorry, Ben, but
Beantown?
That's right. It just goes to show you, and I'm convinced on this take that goes for every bad team, you don't have to be smart to get interesting. And I think Memphis is not dumb at all.
I disagree.
Well,
I think Memphis is smart now.
Oh, yeah, they're smart now, but they got the ping pong balls. If they get the number 3 pick, they don't get Ja Morant. The Knicks are taking Ja. It's just randomness.
That is absolutely true. But I do think Memphis has gotten smart.
Oh, they put themselves in the position to get that pick, right? But
I'm not just talking about being lousy. I'm saying I think they've made smart moves. I think, acquiring Melton, who's excellent for them. I liked their drafting of Brandon Clark. I've liked a lot of the things that Memphis has done. I think they are now a smart franchise, and we're seeing the results of a couple of years of sharpening up.
Okay.
And I think they're going to bring back Iguodala to either play for themselves or they'll trade him off for something. And they are eating bad contracts in exchange for assets. They're doing things the right way, and they did get lucky. But that's how it has to work when you make strides, right? You can make the right decisions over and over and not have that home run hit. But when they work together and they dovetail smart little decisions and then some luck. That's what happened in Philadelphia, and that's what might be happening here.
And that's not what happened in Cleveland,
in Memphis, right?
Yeah,
right.
and there's examples of both, and I think I'm taking smart out of it. I'm sorry I even brought that up, but I think Memphis was looking at the abyss a little bit, and to your point, you do smart things maybe, or small things, but they got lucky. Not only did they get the spots to take Jaren Jackson Jr. before Luka Doncic, which is wild, right? He went before Luka.
Well, it was weird because there was the trade, so I guess he went technically, after Luka.
Okay.
But before trade, but then they were swapped.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Isn't that how it worked?
Yeah, I believe so. I think it was. This is fascinating radio, but regardless of that, I think I look at my Knicks and they got R.J. Barrett, and we knew there was a giant drop off between John Morant and R.J. And when those ping pong balls during that broadcast of the lottery landed that way, I'm like, that's just bad luck. And if you put R.J. Barrett on the Memphis Grizzlies and John Morant in New York, people are talking about these two teams much differently, and it was just a slight butterfly wing, flap of the wing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. If Philadelphia takes
Porzingis or Tatum or whatever.
No, I was going to say in the Embiid draft, if Embiid is healthy and goes first, Philly might end up with Jabari Parker or Wiggins.
Right.
Just a completely different player.
And this is an impossible mind exercise because we'll never know, and these are all this is fan fiction. But what I'm saying is I always remember Dan Gilbert, who might be as awkward as James Dolan, and he lucked into the right pieces at the right time. Not only did he get number one picks, he got Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. So many lucky things have to happen where John Morant is just there. What if John Morant stays in college? What if he doesn't exist in an alternate universe?
And also, in terms of Memphis, they lucked out in that when they were bad, they came up with really good picks and it had good players available because they were a good franchise for a long time.
Really good.
And there was this discussion of when are they going to blow it up? And they waited. And I think that was cool that they embraced their players and the culture of grit and grind, and the fans really liked them. And they resisted the urge to blow it up prematurely until it was really the time to do it. And then now they came back, one draft, two drafts, second pick, fourth pick, two good players, and now they're off and running again. And that is luck. You don't normally get to be good for a decade, suck for 2 years, come up with two good players, and then go back to being good. That is an anomaly. That's true. I think they're making good decisions, but no one else got to do that. Just be shitty, end up with two guys, and not be good again.
Yeah.
They did a 2-year rebuild.
The
by virtue of nailing the draft twice in a row.
Yeah. We'll never know the probability of them becoming this successful this quickly because these are all on weird curves and scales. But getting Jaren Jackson and John Morant back-to-back years is wild, man. Even in the draft, we were these are difference-making players. You put Jaren Jackson Jr. on any team, and he's going to excel. He was a sure thing, and I'm very jealous of the Grizzlies, and I'm very happy for them because grit and grind was so fun. And I feel in my weird ethical universe, they should be rewarded for doing that grit and grind thing because it was really awesome and unique, and they really committed themselves to it. So I'm happy for them and jealous of them.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They almost got karmic payment for saying, we're not going to be means-tested, econometric guys here. We like grit and grind. We're going to play them till the last possible moment. Keep these guys together. They love each other. The city respects them. We know we're not winning a title with this group, but let's trot them out there again. Gasol, Conley, kept Zebo around for a long time.
The team
Bring 'em
was
out
built
there.
around Zebo, kind of.
You know, we love these dudes.
Yeah.
And then because they didn't just, slough everyone off for draft picks, they were like rewarded with like a new sort of core to a franchise. And when you look at like a team like Dallas tanked several years in a row, and they ended up getting Doncic. Most teams have to kind of be bad for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because if you look at their other guys that the Mavs took, they traded away some of their picks, but it'd be like Dennis Smith Jr. or Justin Anderson, and Kelly Olynyk got sent over to Boston. A Zeller went to Cleveland.
Which
like
one?
other I don't know. No one knows. but other teams have to kind of stagger around in the wilderness a little while when they're bad and miss on some picks and get some picks. But Memphis just like 1, 2, okay.
It's awesome.
Good to go.
And it gives me hope as a suffering new metal Knicks fan that it could work out. And no matter how inept their scouting is, sometimes you just take the player everyone wants to take at that spot, and it's Ja Morant.
One team that does bother me here is the Warriors. I don't get why they're so bad. And I know that they're playing some bad players, and that's an easy solution to this dilemma that I'm presenting. But if you have D'Angelo Russell and you have Draymond Green, that's 2 All-Stars. There's no team in the NBA that has 3 All-Stars. You have 2. Your talent should not be that fucking bad. What's happening in Golden State? Why are they so awful?
Well, I think it's a bunch of things, but Draymond Green I'm a huge Draymond Green fan. I think he's amazing, but he's not like a standalone all-star at this point in his career. I think he really clicked with the system they were running and was a dominant, cool player for what he did. So to call him an all-star now is kind of not what I'm seeing. D'Angelo Russell is good. He's kind of also has hints of a prom king.
He is definitely a prom king. He has also missed a bunch of games, though, too. I will say that.
Yeah, and a lot of their players are playing well, but I think Kerr is really throwing out some dubious talent out there for real usage, and he's found some diamonds in the rough. Omari Spellman looks like an NBA player. Alec Burks maybe is tradable. Hopefully not to the Sixers, because I want the Sixers to be good, but they found things, and
Marquise Chris season.
When you employ Willie Cauley-Stein, I don't know really how much you can succeed on an NBA level, and the West is tough, man, and everyone says the East is better this year just looking at record, but the only reason is the West is cannibalizing itself because all of these teams are kind of splitting up win shares. The Warriors,
and we have to be fair. Like Steph Curry deciding not to play this year, pretending to be injured, taking himself out because, what's he supposed to do without KD? Now everyone's going to target him. He's like, I'm not playing. I'm out of here. Just took the season off.
Robin can't do anything without Batman. What's up with your boy Klay Thompson?
Klay, he's healthy. He refuses to play.
He said on his Twitter that he doesn't want it nearly enough.
It is sad to see a dynasty crumble because 2 guys just don't want to play basketball anymore without KD.
It's wild that they put together all those players, didn't win a championship, and now have to rebuild like this. You hate to see it.
It's arduous to feast your eyes upon.
The roster is so bad. It's the personnel. The personnel is laughable, and I think that organization knows the value of the pick. So they're going to be super amazing next year again.
Here's a question. Are they flagrantly tanking? Is Kerr orchestrating a tank? Are they trying to have the worst record in basketball? I would say yes.
I would say yes with a caveat being like, we don't have to try to tank. Our team is just bad.
But that's always generally the case. Like,
yeah.
It's not like we had a great team and we tanked it. There's a few maybe examples of that in general, tanking and being bad go hand in hand.
Right, but if Amari Spellman, let's say he turns into an amazing player, and let's say Draymond Green feels great again, and he's a triple-double machine, and they start racking off wins, he's gonna sit these guys. Like we only say that because we only say they're not tanking because they are tanking. Do you know what I mean? Because they're not good enough not to.
Right, but I remember when the Knicks were awful, and people were like,
"Oh, that one time
the
were
Knicks
awful?
just have to tank." And this was like a couple of years ago. Now everyone knows they're awful. But even when they had Melo, you're like, "Oh, they got to tank, man." You're like, "God, dude, they're like the worst team in basketball." They are. It's happening. You can't. This isn't a strategic decision. You can't say no. We're actually going to be good.
Yeah, and I saw a picture of Melo and Porzingis like running up the court in Knicks uniforms the other night on Google.com, and the vibe part of me was like, "Can we get these guys back? What a team! They're good for 45 wins. These guys." But yeah, I just don't think the Warriors are good enough to do anything except lose games, and we can call it tanking, we can call it valuing the draft or whatever. The roster's really hilarious.
It is, and I'm not really suggesting they should be a lot better, but that 9 wins really just stick out like a sore thumb. You're like, the Warriors have 9 wins, and they do have, as I said, 2 All-Stars on the team, just as a manner of speaking.
Yeah,
like, the Knicks don't have 2 All-Stars. Yeah. The Sacramento Kings don't have 2 All-Stars. The Pelicans don't have 2 All-Stars.
Yeah, but we don't care about all-stars.
I know, but they don't have anyone that we consider being on that level. The Cavs have 12 wins. They don't have 2 All-Stars.
Tristan, maybe.
The Wizards have 1. Charlotte has none. Detroit has 1.
The Bucks have 2.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
The Sixers have 2. The Bucks have 2. The Warriors have 2.
Yeah.
The Lakers have 2.
Yeah. What about your boy Waluigi? No love?
Fine, 3.
I was in San Francisco not too long ago while the Warriors were playing some home games, and I asked a local friend if I could go and check out the new arena, and she was like, "Are you kidding me? Tickets are like all gobbled up by tech people, and you can't get in the door like with decent seats for less than like $300-400." I'm like, "For this team?" And like, "What do you mean? Are they bad again?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're awful." She's like, "I have no idea. I just know we can't go."
Wow, looks like all of your tech nerd apologism has finally backfired.
Right.
Kuo now wants to watch a game and can't because these robber barons from the digital universe have scooped up all the tickets with money that he spent on Seamless. Yeah, hate to see it.
Yeah, you should put this on Twitter and see if it catches on that website.
I don't know. The interns are they will get less cruel if they figure this out.
I love people who hammer tech on Twitter. I don't know. It's funny to me.
Yeah, it's funny. Super funny quote.
Oh, man.
Well,
can we talk about how you were wrong about the Bucks? How you didn't believe in these Milwaukee Bucks?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
Can we
that?
Can we get you to admit that your take has not turned out to be?
But I never said that the Bucks wouldn't have a good record and have a good offensive rating, a good defensive rating, and a good net rating. Like, I thought they would be worse than last year because I thought Brogdon was better than the guys they brought in. I'm not surprised that they're still very good.
Middleton's balling,
and he's whatever. But to be clear, I did not think that some of these guys like DiVincenzo would give them really good minutes. Like, that was not something I anticipated, and those guys have been good.
DiVincenzo,
he's been solid.
He was good in college, man.
Like they've done a good job picking up interchangeable white guys that I don't recognize and getting good minutes from them.
Yo, Middleton offensive box plus minus is 2.8.
He sucks.
Defensive box plus minus 0.1. He's at a plus 2.9. His true shooting is 6.03.
Yeah, he's fine. He's a guy.
Why do you hate him? Is it because of his name? I never get an answer.
He's so boring. He's so boring.
I don't care about boring. He's good.
He's pretty good.
I like him, man. He's got an interesting game. It's Keith Van Horn X.
Yeah, I think I would definitely compare him to Van Horn. Maybe Jeremy Lamb.
Yeah, you don't want to continue this culture of giving white fans a bad name.
I'm not convinced that the Bucks match up that well with Philadelphia because out of maybe the 10 guys you choose to run at Giannis in hopes of slowing him down, Philly has like 2 or 3 of them. I don't think that's a great matchup for them. I don't think the Raptors are like an awesome matchup for them either.
No, the Sixers are kryptonite for a couple teams. I think the Celtics, maybe the Raptors, and like you said, the Bucks, which is interesting, right? Because self-care. They lost a bunch of games this week, and it's frustrating, and they could have won a couple of them. Sometimes they looked really lethargic, and that's not fantastic. But self-care, just get into the playoffs because they need to orchestrate their bracket and make sure they see the Celtics.
I think they destroyed the Celtics. I think they destroy Indiana. I think they destroy almost any other team in the East. I don't think Philly's a great matchup for them, and I just don't really like Toronto's matchup for them either. I just think Toronto's a tough team. They may not have someone to slow down Giannis though. Marcus Gasol, Ibaka, they have some big bodies though.
Yeah. I mean, I want to do the sports radio thing, but we're coming up to the deadline. I want to talk about what you think about the moves that maybe Toronto could make, the Sixers. I think all those 2 teams especially are a piece away from being super scary.
I don't think Toronto needs to do anything major, but they do have the pieces to go after a star that's sitting around out there. And Ujiri will do it. He showed the willingness to roll the dice big twice when he got Kawhi and then when they got Marcus Gasol. He's willing to do it. So I would agree that they are absolutely a threat to say, okay, we're going to give you OG and we're going to give you someone else and we're going to go and try to get, another stud. We're going to chase Bradley Beal hard or whatever. They will roll the dice on a big move. If you have Lowry and you have Siakam and you have Van Vliet, there's some pieces to move around a little bit and still maintain excellence from your core players.
What if he trades Van Vliet and OG to New York and then goes to New York as their new king, their new president?
That would be very sly.
No sin bin, but this is sports related, and I think it's really interesting. Have you heard about this baseball stuff? About the cheating?
Yes, the Astros stealing signs, being exposed, being busted, and now the suspensions are coming down, right?
But it's rooted in technology because people have been stealing signs for decades. It's a tradition and kind of gamesmanship, but they use cameras and tech, and people are getting suspended left and right. And it brought up Pete Rose and cheating and gambling and steroids. And the NBA has kind of been dodging all these ideas. We've had crooked refs that have done time in jail. We've had inklings of the way David Stern manipulated his finals products. But when are we going to get... Is the poo going to hit the fan with the NBA eventually? Or do they know that the MLB is making a mistake by coming down on this kind of boomer culture, and is the NBA just really not interested in this?
The NBA has relatively been Teflon coated when it's come to avoiding the plagues of other sports leagues. That Donaghy scandal,
huge.
That could have been just outrageous, and it just sort of got tucked into the lore of the league, and people who thought that games were fixed in the past used it as evidence. But they were all sort of conspiracy-minded to begin with, and we all collectively moved on, despite a ref saying, we were fixing games and betting on them. You're like, well, that was kind of big news. Whatever the truth of it was, the NBA just kind of got away with it or emerged relatively unscathed. And same deal with steroids. I don't know what Ayton was using. I don't know... what your guy on the Hawks, John Collins was using.
Yeah.
But we know that Orlando team with Rashard Lewis and Hideo Turkoglu, There were two dudes who got busted with roids on the same team, and they were in Orlando, like where like Balco is from, and like there are a lot of things that you could look at and say somehow basketball avoided steroids, it avoided gambling, all these kind of elements, and I would say it's because the product remains really good.
Yes, this is the steak review idea. This is when Peter Luger's gets a bad review for their service because finally their steaks are not as good as other steaks. So
the NBA kept putting out hits, so we didn't start talking about Yeezy's politics. The NBA was dropping bangers, dropping jams. We're like, I don't really care what the NBA has going on beneath the surface because like LeBron's out here doing LeBron shit with the Heat. And the Warriors are here doing this, and then there's all these exciting young players. You know, if there's some sordid stuff going on, we want to overlook it.
Yeah.
We'd rather pretend it's not there.
Like, what is the ramifications of David Stern shaping the league to his vision? Oh, we get Michael Jordan. I'm happy with that. My childhood was great. MJ, you know?
The NBA deciding that traveling was legal.
And this is an interesting debate because I think it's about culture versus the product, and I think if the culture is healthy and excitable like NBA Twitter is, we get to talk about everything that surrounds the game, and the game kind of remains untouched. And this makes me think of like the JJ Redick thing that dropped. Well, you know, he had that ridiculous quote where he said players should concentrate more on the game and less on their pregame drips, and it kind of was a dog whistle to a more of a Major League Baseball audience. And it fell on deaf ears, in my opinion, with the NBA audience because we don't do that in the NBA, right? Like we learned our lessons from Iverson. Iverson was right. And I think the joy of the pregame drip is a part of this whole ecosystem. And JJ pretending like he doesn't support that I just don't believe him.
Right. Is JJ really telling us that there are guys who care more about their fit pick, like not bricking an outfit, than like how they play on the court? Does he really believe that, or is this just some old man shit that old men say?
Yeah, maybe he does. And, you know, I think JJ at his core intent is trying to talk about something that he's right about, but it comes off as a little bit racist. And, you know, he has people are hammering him for having an in-season podcast and actually like caring about fashion. And I don't think people are wrong 100% when they're like, some of these guys just aren't focused. And I'm like, yeah, you could just say that. Like some of these really, really great players don't seem to really enjoy the game. I'm like, that's true. I'll accept that. But framing it as they're worried about their brand or about interests outside of the game, it just doesn't really hold water.
Well, the problem's that he's coaching it in generational criticism in that regard. If he just said, there are guys in the NBA who are not as good as they could be because they're not focused.
Totally legit.
That could apply to anyone in the league. Yep. But when you start saying about like their outfits, now you're talking about young guys and you're talking about young black guys. Yeah. So he pigeonholed a critique that is almost certainly true. There are guys who could probably work harder and be more focused and be, you know, Dober Mamba maniacal and work more. But they're like, yo, I like basketball, but I also like being, you know, I like other stuff too.
I like to express myself.
But when he puts it, makes it about social media and he makes it about wardrobes and he turns it into being about young black men and not just about like professionalism. And, you know, I've been around the league for a long time and I'm still here because I have to dedicate X amount of hours to getting shots up. But he opens himself up to criticism for hypocrisy because he had a gold toilet. You know, my man has like a Maroon 5 tattoo on his sleeve. He has a zillion photos of him wearing tailored suits going through the runway. He clearly valued looking cool.
His haircut, he has the same barber as Porzingis. and Gordon Hayward. Come on, man. There's one guy in the universe that does that haircut, and he's got him.
You have to go to Greenpoint for that.
And I'm not even dogging JJ Redick for all of these interests that he has, and I'm not even accusing him of being weird. He seems like a nice guy.
He's also an investor in the infatuation. He's super into food. Like Redick has other values.
He's cool, man.
He has other values. He does not dedicate all waking hours to being a better basketball player. So yes, he opens himself up to a critique of his own values when he says, basically, there are young black guys who are more into social media and outfits than basketball. And
right. And
you're like, well, what about you, dude?
I know he wears nice suits in going up to games, and I think it goes back to this thing that I'm obsessed with, is like a lot of criticism just feels like a tune, and he's singing a tune that he's heard before, so he just like blurts out this melody. I'm like, oh, you don't really like this song. It's just stuck in your head. Like, you don't mean this.
Hell yeah. That's the great way of putting it, because, again, he is someone who I'm sure has to work on his game a lot because he is older. He has to really stay in shape. He's got to do a lot of things because he's a small dude with short arms who is a unitasker. He can't dribble. He can't pass. He can't defend. He can't get to the rim. He's got one skill that he needs to really hone and make sure it's awesome, because without it, he can't earn a living.
And he got better. He became a better defender throughout his career.
Maybe.
People applaud him for his work ethic, but he's still a prom king.
He's a prom king for sure. He went to Duke.
The one and
prom
done
king
bus
from
factory.
the one and done.
Are we going to pod before Big Zion makes his on-court appearance on Wednesday? Maybe not. What's your take?
Let's record right afterwards so we can talk about what we saw.
Should they have... should we save it? Should they have...
Let's save it.
Okay.
Let's come in fresh with watching Zion, and then we can talk about this huge mistakes they're making.
I hope Zion's healthy, and I'm so excited. I will be watching the hell out of that game.
You gotta love basketball. This is cookie scoops.
Cookie.